Hi there, Chevrolet owners. Today in your 2018 Chevrolet Silverado 1500, we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install Sumo springs for the rear axle. You can get these in 3 different weight capacities, that being either 1,000, 1,500, or 2,800 pounds of carrying support. Before we start our installation, we want to get a baseline of how our truck responds with the factory suspension so we can see the improvement that the Sumo springs are going to make. So the first thing we do, we're going to take our vehicle here and it's currently unloaded. We want to get what our ride height is unloaded. So when we check from the ground here, we're looking at about 39 inches. Here at the back, we'll then check our front ride height as well. And when we go to the front, we're at about 38 inches here in the front. So we're going to go ahead and drop about 1,000 pounds of water weight in the back, and then we're going to see how that affects our ride height. So now that we've got our weight in here, we've dropped down about 3.5 inches from what our factory ride height was, bringing us down a little bit below 36, a little above 35.5. So we're going to come up here to the front now, recheck here, and here at the front, we've raised it up by nearly 1/2 inch. We're close to 38.5 inches there. So we're going to go ahead and hit our test course to see how it handles on the test course. Then we'll get them installed. We'll recheck our ride heights to see how the Sumo springs have improved it. So now that we're loaded up, we're going to go hit our test course here and see how it feels. And boy, it sure seemed like this truck, the suspension did not take to weight very well. I'm a little surprised for a full-size truck at how much it squatted in comparison with a lot of other trucks that we've loaded down with the same weight. For example, the 2500 model barely moved, while this really slammed our truck. So we've hit our test course here. We're starting out on the uneven bump section first, and this is going to simulate like hitting a pothole. And I will say that while I can tell the truck is slammed in the back and we can feel that we're pulling a lot of weight, the suspension is actually fairly smooth, but boy, is it really bouncing the truck, and our nose is just straight up in the air. It's actually making it, you can tell there's a lot of visibility that has been removed because I see so much of the hood here. And I guarantee at night we're gonna have our headlights at the sky. We've gone through our uneven bumps and now we're on the even bump section of the course, and this is going to simulate like hitting a pothole. And every time we go over that bump, especially when the back hits there, boy, we got a lot of oscillations up and down. Part of that's because we're using water for our weight, but the other part is just all that extreme suspension. It's probably us hitting the Jounce bumpers on the way down, and the Jounce bumpers kind of bouncing us up and down a little bit. Because I did hop underneath real quick after we loaded it up just to see what the suspension looked like, and there is a small gap. Our Jounce bumper isn't touching when we're just normally sitting here, but I guarantee when we hit any bumps, with the small gap we had, it was hitting, and that really stiffens up your suspension and starts to cause bouncing. So now we're going to head into the slalom section of our course, and this is where we're going to simulate an evasive maneuver. And I'm not gonna lie, I don't feel very comfortable driving this truck with all the weight that we've got in here. A lot of other trucks I felt a lot more comfortable with. This one, we're not gonna be taking it nearly as fast as I would, because boy, I can really feel the weight throwing itself around in this truck. And honestly, we're only doing about 10 miles an hour here, and I'm too afraid to go any higher because I can really feel the weight just throwing around in the back, and that water really wants to slosh. I don't want to damage this guy's truck here. So we're going to get it back to the shop. We're going to get our Sumo springs on, see how it handles the weight afterwards. And I do expect we're going to have a lot more confidence coming into the slalom section here. We'll see how it hits the bump section. There's a chance that it may be fairly similar there, because with our Sumo springs, we're going to have contact in most cases almost all the time. So we're going to get that dynamic support from that Sumo spring versus our current situation. We've got suspension support under some circumstances, and we have Jounce bumper support under other circumstances. So it's really jarring and uneven. It makes it more difficult to handle because your suspension stiffness is kind of changing as that bumper contacts and doesn't contact. So let's get into the shop here and make this right. So now that we've got our Sumo springs installed, we've gone ahead and loaded it back up again and check our ride height here. And we're only down about 2 inches from where we were before, so looks like we've come up quite a bit from where we were at before. Before we were down right at close to 36, a little bit below, so that's a full inch or better that it's brought us up. Let's go see where the front is. Our front was sticking up pretty well towards the sky before. If we recheck it here, we're only a little bit less than a 1/4 inch up above from our factory ride height. So we're getting pretty close to our factory ride height there. We are still down a little bit in the back there, but it should be a considerably better ride than what we had before. So let's hit the test course and see how it plays out. So here we are hitting our test course. Once again, we're gonna hit our uneven bump section, which kind of simulates hitting a pothole. And it definitely feels different than it did before. I would say it feels a little bit stiffer than before, but we don't seem to have quite as much oscillations. But boy, when we hit that bump, it does feel like it kind of just transfers that movement into the cab a little bit more. So it's definitely stiffer. That should work out to our advantage when we get into the slalom section. Usually that helps out there. We're coming up to the even bump section now, and this is our section that kind of simulates going over a speed bump. And when we come over the bump there, you can definitely feel in the front when we go over the bump, we got some oscillations, but the back when it hits, it's just kind of up, down, and then we settle right back out. So it seemed to reduce some oscillations there in the back. It does feel a little bit stiffer though when we hit them, and that's probably just because we're transferring some of the loads a little bit. So we're heading into the slalom section next here. And unloaded, I did not feel very confident at all. The weight was really throwing the back end around. It really felt like we were making things worse by throwing that water around. So let's see how we work out here in this section. And oh man, there's a huge difference in the amount of sway. We've got drastic drops in the amount of sway. We're up to about 17 miles an hour now. Could probably hit it a little bit faster, but we don't want to have our water potentially slide and cause any damage to the back of the truck there. So we're gonna head back now, but there was some definite improvements. I mean, the anti-sway that we've got out of these really feels good compared to the factory ones. That seems to be where we're getting a big benefit here is we got all that extra weight. Without the SumoSprings, you go to turn and it really wants to throw that weight around. Putting these on here seemed to have tamed that quite a bit. As far as the ride quality goes and the ride height, it didn't make as much of a difference as I was hoping, but it definitely feels great as far as how confident I feel hauling this heavy weight and being able to stay in control the whole time. And this is what our SumoSprings look like when they're installed. They replace your factory Jounce bumpers and go between the frame and your axle to work with your suspension to provide additional assistance. We can see this is our factory Jounce bumper here that we had replaced, and you can see it's considerably smaller than what our SumoSpring is. It's not only shorter, meaning that there's a much larger distance before this bump stop here contacts down here to provide any support. And it's also quite a bit thinner in its diameter. So you can see you're gonna get a lot more support from this, and you're also gonna have that support throughout a much larger portion of your suspension travel. And what this means for you is that your factory suspension here is no longer going to be doing pretty much all the work, because your factory Jounce bumper is really just to keep your suspension from bottoming out. It's really not there to provide any support. Whereas this guy, we're going to be able to get varying amounts of support as it compresses. The more our SumoSpring compresses, the more support that it provides. SumoSprings constructed of a microcellular urethane that's resistant against UV and road grime, so you can expect long-lasting operation out of your SumoSpring here. And in addition to help support the weight that we're going to be putting here in the back of our truck, restoring some of that lost ride quality that we had, and also to help level our vehicle back out, it's also going to help reduce sway because we've got one of these on each side. And since it contacts sooner, if we have any sway to the left or to the right, our SumoSpring here is going to contact and help push our vehicle, keeping it back upright. So you're going to definitely get an enhancement in your handling with these installed. And oftentimes this also helps smooth out your ride when you're hauling a heavy load. So we've gone ahead and pulled our truck into the shop, but we've got our SumoSprings here. I just want to take a quick look at them to show you that they do come in 3 different sizes as far as their weight capacities. We've got the lowest weight rating to the highest here, with this being 1,000 pounds, 1,500 pounds, and 2,800 pounds as far as how much that it can support. All 3 of these are going to install the exact same way. You can see they're all very similar size. It's just the construction of the material here that determines its carrying capacity. So we're going to go ahead and get these installed. I just wanted to show you this layout because when you're looking at these, you might go, hey, maybe 1,000 isn't quite enough. What are my other options? You can see that you've got plenty of options here, and then this procedure for installing them is going to be the same. So let's go ahead and get under the truck now. We're going to show you how to get these installed. So now we've got our truck into the shop. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to chalk the front wheels. This is important because we're going to need to lift up on the back end a little bit. so we can have enough space to put our new components in place. And you're likely going to be doing this at home on the ground, and this lift here is pretty much like having it on the ground. It's fully loaded still. Our suspension is just like it would be on the ground at home. So if you're doing this on the ground at home, you're going to want to do the exact same thing. And we've placed a pole jack here under the back. Now if you're doing this at home on your garage, just on the ground, you can use a floor jack here at the back underneath your hitch. Since we're on a lift here, that's why we're using the pole jack. And this is going to raise up on the frame of our vehicle here, moving it further away from the axle, giving us more space to be able to work to get our components installed. And that should be plenty of space there. We're just, again, looking to try to just increase that gap, make things easier. So now we've got everything prepped. We're under the vehicle here. This is the factory Jounce bumper that we need to remove. Our new one here is going to be taking its place. So in order to remove your Jounce bumper, the first thing you're going to need to do is get a socket that's a 10 millimeter and an extension, because we need the right length to be able to go up in there to get our bolt, but still have some sticking out the bottom here to be able to attach our tool to. So a little 3-inch extension here. A short well works. If you got a deep well, you might need a shorter extension. That just goes up through the center there. We'll take our ratchet here and remove our bolt. Now we've got our bolt out of the way. Simply grab the Jounce bumper, just kind of give it a twist or a pull, and it'll pop right out of there. Now at this point, we're ready to start putting our new Jounce bumper in place. We're going to take the plate that comes on our Jounce bumper, and we're going to install this up into here. You're going to get some bolts in your kit as well as some washers. The washers here we're going to use to help take up some of the space. The the nut, you can go ahead and get rid of. That's for if you have an older vehicle. This is designed to work on more than just this model year Silverado. So it may not be threaded in there. That's when you would use the nut. Ours is threaded though, and our bolt will thread right into it. These washers are here for you to stack up to take up the space here in the middle of your cup. We're going to try taking 2 washers off and then just see how it feels. So we remove 2 of the washers. We're then going to take the remaining washers that are on there, pull those off, slide our bolt through so that way it can be flush on the bottom, and then our washers are going to go back on top, minus the 2 that we had just removed. So now we're going to set it up here. Line up your bolt. I like to just put a thread on it to hold it, and then just push up on your cup and see if it rocks back and forth. We want to be up against the bottom of the cup, and it feels like we need to probably take out 1 more washer because we got a lot of rocking going on there. We're not sitting very even, so we're just going to take 1 more washer off, put it back up there, put a thread on it just to hold it, and then see that our cup sits. And this feels very nice. Sits up there all the way up against our cup. We're taking up the gap that we need to with those washers, so now we can just go ahead and install bolt that we had just put in there. We're going to use a 6 millimeter Allen key to tighten it down, and you want to hold this while tightening it because we want the stud here to be towards the back, just like that. We can now take our Sumo spring and thread it onto our stud. We do want to have this fully covered in blue Loctite. It comes in your kit, but for demonstration purposes today, we're not going to be putting the Loctite on there. We're just test fitting these. They will be coming back off. And it simply just threads right onto your bracket, just like that. And then we can perform the exact same procedures over on the other side to get that one installed. And that completes our installation of Sumo springs for the rear axle on our 2018 Chevrolet Silverado 1500.